If the 20th century had a face, it was not the face of a king or emperor or president, not even that of a dictator. If the 20th century had a face, it was the face of a man without a home, without a name, a man who never said a word, yet spoke a language the whole world heard loud and clearly. If the 20th century had just one face, it was the face of a nobody who became the symbol for all of humanity.
Master Charles Chaplin!
It's 1940. As the world is dragged deeper and deeper into the abyss, Charles Chaplin steps onto a stage and slowly walks up to a microphone. He knows what he has to do, and he knows what it'll cost him. The Little Tramp, half of Charlie Chaplin's soul, will die at the first sound of his voice.
I'm sorry.
For almost 3 decades, Chaplin has been the most famous man on planet Earth, a global superstar. And yet, very few people actually know what he looks like, or sounds like, because it's not really Charlie that's so famous. It's him, his alter ego, the tramp, penniless, homeless, nameless, voiceless, a nobody forgotten by society. And yet he is the most iconic and beloved figure of the century. A century that was shell-shocked. A century in which the sacred individual was swallowed by the machine of industry, war, and economic madness. And in which silent nobody was the one to give the people back their voice. Chaplin's universal underdog transcended language, culture, nations, and religions. His wordless dreams and hardships spoke a plain and simple dialect the whole world was familiar with. He was often hungry, cold, heartbroken and traumatized, unable to keep up with the march of so-called progress, always left behind, yet always willing to try and try and try again. He's a scoundrel with a heart of gold, an unwashed gentleman, a dreamer in the face of sobering reality. He's a coward when he can be, but a hero when he must be. He's a misfit, a rebel, and a survivor. He's always vulnerable, but ultimately unbreakable. He's just a little guy who refuses to let the bastards grind him down. Chaplin took the nameless, voiceless, and all but erased common man and turned him back into an individual, a timeless global icon, and one whose experiences were all too painfully familiar to Charlie himself, as his own childhood was equally stamped by poverty, hunger, loneliness, and trauma. The Tramp may have made Chaplin the wealthiest entertainer in the world, but the character was much more than just an act. The memories of his childhood are alive in every single scene. Chaplin's own traumatic past had provided him with a profoundly personal understanding of the voiceless. The pain of his childhood would always fuel his work and his compassion. It just so happened that at the same time there was a man whose pain had only fueled his hatred. But unlike Chaplin's tramp, he was neither nameless nor voiceless. If Charlie had turned the anonymous huddled masses into a human being with a voice, a face, and a story worth telling, Hitler sought to do the exact opposite. The individual had to go. To him, people were best served as cogs in a machine of war and domination, an unthinking, unfeeling, faceless force to be mobilized for his own benefit, or to be destroyed. Where Chaplin was an individualist down to his bones, Hitler dreamed of a regimented Reich. They are two men who couldn't have been more different, and yet Chaplin himself was no stranger to the tyrannical impulse, or to paralyzing perfectionism, or to the stubborn defiance against change. While the Tramp was a symbol of free-spirited charm and happenstance, behind the scenes there was never much room for happy accidents. Chaplin carefully controlled every single aspect of his work, From countless takes to curating the actors' performances with a fine-tooth comb and firing or rehiring the same people all over again, Chaplin had built a reputation for being obsessive, maniacal even, always chasing after that singular vision which he could never quite catch. Chaplin understood the need for perfection and control, but ultimately grew to realize how elusive and even destructive they can be. He was greatly disturbed by the similarities between Hitler and himself, born just 4 days apart, both able to command and influence the crowd with exaggerated pathos, and both obsessive, capable of anything they wanted to achieve. He knew him, and as everyone else stayed silent on the topic of the Führer, Chaplin also knew he had to say something, so much so that he was willing to pay the ultimate price. The future was at stake, and it waited for no man, least of all Charles Chaplin and the Tramp.
The world awaits your word.
You are now listening to a talking moving picture.
With Talking Pictures, cinema had entered a new era, one which all of Hollywood was quick to embrace.
We believe an entirely new art will be created.
The beginning of a new era in motion pictures.
For the time being, however, Charlie Chaplin, its biggest star, remained silent.
You must speak. I can't. You must. It's our only hope.
Charlie knows that as soon as the Tramp speaks, he also dies. It's his silence that gives him life, energy. It's his silence that makes him universal, why everyone understands him. It's his silence that contains everything. For years, he cannot think of one good reason to kill the Tramp with something so trivial as words. Until Adolf Hitler. When he sees the Führer's speeches, he is horrified to the core, and he makes a decision. He will sacrifice his greatest creation, but only on the altar of freedom.
I know you bastard.
The Little Tramp and everyone he represents will finally speak.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair.
And he will die because of it. But he will go out saying something Charles Chaplin believes in.
The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
When everyone else hesitated, Chaplin stood on a stage and committed an act of defiance against tyranny. He was the silent voice of millions. But when silence was no longer enough, he dared to speak.
Let us all unite!
And he did it as a homeless, nameless, voiceless tramp.
My only enemy is time, Mr. Chaplin said. We respectfully disagree. For wherever and whenever there is communication, a screen and an audience, whether here on Earth and now, or in some unfathomable future on some faraway star, time is Charlie Chaplin's dearest and eternal friend.